and we're just creating a bigger network of people taking climate action. So I will share at the end of the call some activities taking place throughout the week. So stay on for those last few minutes. But for now, I want to get us straight into our session for today by introducing Albert Alwang, Economic Development Director with Wake County Economic Development. Albert's also an advisor to creation of NC Climate Week and is moderating the call today. Albert.
Thank you so much, Heather, and really honored to be a part of this panel and really excited to talk through what we hope to talk about today. So a little bit of background on the panel and myself to kind of set the stage for the conversation. So as Heather mentioned, Albert Alwang with Wake County Economic Development. I lead the business recruitment and expansion team. So I think most folk recognize us as the group and partners that help when a company announces in our area. An example of this is Fujifilm Biotechnologies announcing more than $3.2 billion in capital investment in a facility in Holly Springs. So we were the team that helped through that process. And the reason I mentioned them specifically is because they've helped us set up the Business Sustainability Roundtable, which I'll get to in just a second. But I think one of the things I want to underscore of our region's growth, and it's something that the leaders at the local, the county, and the state level are really focused with. And luckily, the companies that we are dealing with in our region, specifically Wake County, are really focused on environmental sustainability. That is often a question that we get. They want to know the access to renewables. They want to understand how they can move the needle in terms of their commitments, but also support local commitments. And that led us some of those conversations led us into the creation of what the Chamber calls the Business Sustainable Roundtable, which is a group of companies, local governments, and some nonprofits working together to help move corporate sustainability here locally, but also help move our sustainability from a community standpoint. So it's a great forum for sharing of ideas and resources on sustainability. And actually, the reason for this conversation was brought from conversations we had with some of the folks on that Sustainable Roundtable, and in the light of a new change in federal policies and focuses, a lot of shifts on the global level, we kept getting questions on, well, how are companies continuing their climate mission? How are they continuing their commitments? How are they reporting? What are the best practices? What are some new changes? And that was kind of the spark to get this conversation together. So with no further ado, I'm going to invite our panelists to give a little bit of background on themselves. They are truly experts in this field. We have about 25 minutes of kind of moderated panel, but then we'd love to open it up for general questions. But can I have Michelle give a little bit of background on herself, and then also Trevor do that afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Albert. Excited to be here today. Michelle Marks, I'm a founder and managing partner at Ideas on Purpose. We are a 25-year-old firm focused on communicating sustainability and impact. We working really through design forward communications and brand building ecosystems. We work with clients ranging from private companies to Fortune 100 companies. And we find that what we really do is partner with our clients to identify the issues that matter most, address how other companies see you, and create effective communications that drive business outcomes, engage stakeholders, and strengthen reputation. We have really deep experience in corporate reporting, having done more than 400, I think, reports for companies of all shapes and sizes. So that's a little background on me and Ideas on Purpose.
Thank you, Michelle. Trevor?
Great, thanks. My name's Trevor Pearson. I'm a public affairs director at APCO based in Raleigh. And I'm very happy to be here for North Carolina Climate Week. As a director, I focus on the intersection of energy security, sustainability, and public policy. At APCO, for those who may not be familiar, we're a global advisory and advocacy firm, and we sit at the crossroads of business, policy, and society, helping our clients across the spectrum from nonprofits to major corporations, small startups, to identify opportunities, mitigate risk, and specifically I work in the public policy space. And before I came to APCO, I served on Capitol Hill as a policy advisor in both the House and the Senate, advising Republicans on energy policy. And I worked for members from Arizona, and Arizona is not a fossil fuel state. So when we're talking about energy and energy jobs for Arizona politicians, it was renewable energy. We have a lot of sunshine and a lot of land in Arizona, so solar was big even 20 years ago. Also, nuclear, hydropower, wind were all major sources of energy. So it kind of started me on this interesting path in energy policy that I worked in this space and advised Republicans, but largely my background is being built in clean energy. And so let's move forward in my career that I largely focus on how do we talk to conservative audiences about sustainability and about climate and about clean energy. And that brings us to a very interesting time here where we've seen a lot of policy changes from the Trump administration and a lot of challenges to even talking about climate. And it's important now more than ever that business community especially understands how to continue to engage here and maintain commitments and understand how to speak about these things. And largely that's understanding the audience and speaking to folks about shared priorities. And that's the building block to start here. And I'm excited to be able to have the conversation with Michelle and Albert.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Trevor and Michelle. And Trevor, we're going to come back to you to talk a little bit about this shift. But Michelle, I'd love for you to kind of expand on what makes climate impact communications resonate most effectively with stakeholders, and who typically are those stakeholders that we're trying to communicate.
So the who is always a really good question, and it really depends on what it is and what topic you're talking about and what your aim is. I think that the thing that will make it resonate, whatever it is to look inward first and to really define why your company or your organization is engaging in this topic. And when you understand why it matters to you, and then you need to understand why it matters to them, whoever the them is that you're talking to, you can make a much better communication that connects. You want to be sure you tailor those communications depending on your audience, because a communication to a business partner is a little different than a communication to an employee or as a community member. It depends on what your aims are. But it doesn't mean that the foundation is different. The why you do it and what your kind of purpose is in doing it is the same. It's just the way that you're communicating those things to the various audiences is a little more tailored. And I would say that if you have it, data is a superpower. It is important to back up anything you're saying with data if you have it. But you need to give context, and you need to bring understanding through stories that people relate to, right? Because data is awesome, but emotion is what moves people. And so if you want to create action, you need to connect with folks and you need to bring it to them, whatever that connection might be, depending on the audience and the aim.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Michelle, for providing that context. And maybe shifting gears a little bit. Trevor, Michelle talked about being authentic and communicating effectively, and now kind of shifting to the new politics of what we're dealing with today. I think there's a lot of concerns, rightly, for kind of what does the new sustainability language look like in the current administration. But I'm curious, what are some potential advances that could help this work be more smarter more broader? And does it allow for an opportunity for folks in charge of the company's initiatives to reiterate the necessity of these programs? I'm curious if you can kind of unpack that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, it's a challenging time. That's just it. That's true. So we could acknowledge that. But I do want to highlight how we navigate this, or like how we can capture some opportunity here. So one, we have to broaden the audience that is interested in these things, and that may mean we change the language that we use. But Michelle's spot on when she talked about understanding the why. Why are we even talking about this? Why are we doing that? And if you understand why, it helps you to broaden your audience. If the purpose is to to make your company more efficient, more sustainable, to manage risk, that's a great place to start, to talk to your stakeholders, to talk to your employees, to talk to your leadership about the value this brings. And then you're on solid ground if you do get policy or political questions, because you can say this makes great business sense and is very important for us to do because it's mitigating risk and it's making us more sustainable for the long term. Then I also think that if we look at it from the direction of pressure breeds innovation, greater scrutiny is going to mean that we have to rethink the way that we're doing things. So it's maybe our sustainability practices themselves. So really take a hard look to see if they're working. Are they actually creating progress, moving beyond that kind of check the box of simply reporting or talking about it. Because if you don't adapt, you're going to get in trouble. So in that way, the pressure can be helpful there too. And I think I was going to say sharpening the business case, but Michelle, I saw some of your commentary ongoing from New York Climate Week last week, where you shared some frustrations. Like, of course, we need to share the business case. We've always shared the business case. That's what we've always been advising our clients. And I totally agree. But we still need to do it more, right? It's like we can't get away from that. And I think it's our responsibility as advisors, experts here, to remind folks that there needs to be a solid why behind this. And that's what we need to lead with, because opposition thinks it's just a bunch of value signaling. And so we can combat that and make this a stronger, I don't want to say movement, but action going forward by very clearly tying in, the value and the business case.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah, I was about to say, Michelle, you look like you wanted to add.
So I in one of my takeaways from New York Climate Week early in the week, there were sort of two phrases that kept getting bandied about, and both of them made me frustrated. And one was like moving from morality to materiality, and the other was make the business case. And both of them really hit the wrong note for me. Because again, for 20 years, we've been talking about making the business case and how to tie sustainability to value creation, because that's what it's all about for business. I guess I felt like that when you're in a group of like-minded individuals, which these climate weeks tend to bring together, we're already all on the same team here. They're not really people attending these events that need convincing. I felt like it was too surface and really should have gone a level deeper, and that one of my goals, right, is to move beyond sort of these flip statements, and to help people actually communicate the things that matter, which is not about using buzzwords, and it's not about using all of the things. It's really about moving beyond, hopefully, and I agree with everything you said, right? It's not political. It's our planet that we live on, that we'd like to continue to live on. So I'm hoping that, that's my own personal perspective on it. That's what I think you saw on that.
Yeah, and then if I just to add on to that, Michelle, you said go beyond the surface and really get in there. So an example of this, we're advising a client who's in this semiconductor industry space, and they like to talk about that they are very sustainable. They have, they want to lower their environmental footprint. It's very good, and I believe it, and it's true. I've seen the data; it's true. But as we're helping them prepare some of their talking points going into a major conference, we're like, okay, what does that mean? Tell me more about that. So, and it's a very cool story to tell. Their innovations and how they produce semiconductors means that their semiconductors are more efficient so that they use less energy. Semiconductors power everything, on the planet, right? So if those use less energy, then the entire technology supply chain can use less energy. So, so I said, that's very interesting. Like, let's run some numbers on that. Like, get a smart person to put some life to that, because that is an interesting why, about sustainability, or rather than just saying that word, we can show the things that we are doing on the business side are reducing our energy use and demands on resources.
So I love this thread, and Michelle, coming back to you, talking about the authenticity, being credible. I think a lot of folks are probably familiar with the term greenwashing. So, how can companies continue to build that credibility, and what does that look like? What are the actions to build the credibility? I know we talked on some, but I'd love to expand on that.
Yeah, to build all the same thread. I feel like there's two really key points here. The first is it's always good to share progress. Don't wait for perfection. It's a long, hard road. Everybody's on this road. And, you don't wait to reach the top of Mount Everest to say, I climbed a mountain, right? You're giving updates along the way. It was hard to get to base camp, or I'm going to kill this metaphor, but the idea is that you want to share what you learned at each step of the way, what those setbacks were and how you dealt with them. Nobody is doing this. And there is no matter what the charts look like, there's not like the one straight line or the glide path, or, it is a bumpy road for everyone. And the more that you are honest about these things, that these challenges that you have to tackle, or things didn't go your way, or, oh, we did an acquisition and now we're 3 steps backwards. This happens to every company. And there is, in a way, we really do need to destigmatize this idea of resetting the goal, or reevaluating, right? Because people put financial targets out there all the time, and if they miss them or they don't, they have reasons. It's the same thing. You're putting something out there. It is a goal that you are working towards. There are things that happen along the way, and so the more that you can talk about what happened, what you learned, is really the key there. Then it is not greenwashing. It's actually honest truth, right? You're not going to make claims. Again, some of this is different if you're talking about a product versus a company, but the idea is you're not making these big claims with nothing to back them up. And then the second point, which is related, is that no one needs to talk about every issue. And I think it's more important now than it's ever been before to really, again, back to your why. What is material to your business or your organization? You don't need to, just because whatever the topic is, hot, doesn't mean you have to talk about it. So you want to pick the things that are material to your business. You want to know why you're engaging on those topics. And then you want to tell stories that are business relevant. So again, data is a magic sprinkle, but those are the two key points in my mind, is that you want to talk about material topics that matter to your business and are aligned with your why.
Yeah.
You hear progress and not wait for perfection.
Michelle, I love those comments. I think some of the conversations that we have on the Business Sustainable Roundtable, a lot of them are, this is or clean goal, and this is where we're at. We've achieved it because we've had some companies that have been here for legacy. But the most interesting conversations are how to get through those and get to the mountaintop, right? And it's about the permitting. It's about everything in the learning experience. And I think most of the conversations we have in that group are about the learning aspect of it, right? Trevor, shifting gears a little bit, I think Heather mentioned the impact on the hurricane. That is something that resonates with a lot of North Carolinians, impact a lot of lives, but it also resonates with a lot of folks in this space. As we talk about resilience and sustainability and climate change, I'm curious, what has been the impact of the hurricane in terms of sustainability policy here in North Carolina, and what are kind of the conversations that both communities at the local level are having, but also the state legislator, like what are they talking about when we're talking about the impacts of the hurricane?
Yeah, that's a great question and an important one. As we just talked about at the opening here, we're 1 year from Hurricane Helene that devastated our state. And there's um, a few interesting things. I think number one, first and foremost, is that it made the impact of extreme weather very real for everybody across the state. In North Carolina specifically, I think we tend to think of extreme weather for the coast. And, you know, the coast is very used to having hurricanes and extreme weather. And so it was shocking, of course, to see this come through the western part of the state. So in that way, it's made the impacts of climate change very real for everybody. Now, has it converted everybody into a climate action taker? No, not necessarily, but we'll take some steps that we're getting there. And I think one of those is understanding resilience and adaptation is very important. So how we build back, legislators and policymakers have understood that we need to understand the fact that extreme weather is more and more frequent, and we need to be prepared for that. You know, I was just talking with Secretary Wilson from Department of Environmental Quality and incoming Secretary Johnson for Transportation yesterday about this very topic, asking 1 year in, you know, what are our learnings, where are we? And we talked about rebuilding, the efforts there, things like that. And so I asked this question, knowing that, you know, coming into this conversation today, what has it been like working with the Democratic governor and Republican legislature on rebuilding and talking about you know, climate and resiliency? And it was heartening to hear that it was largely bipartisan, that the efforts that understanding that resiliency needs to be part of our recovery, but also a lot more conversations about things like natural, you know, restoring natural ecosystems and how those can help us be more resilient, restoring wetlands. We've seen millions of dollars go into restoring wetlands in Western North Carolina. And so kind of broadening the tent of people who understand the value of those types of solutions has been good. So some silver linings coming from that. I think also that adaptation and mitigation have always been a little bit easier sells to Republicans, to be honest. And rather than saying let's fix climate change, we can get them on board by saying let's build better or smarter. And that's not the complete answer. You know, we can't settle there, but it's progress that we should take. And a way, again, that we can engage our audiences about things that they, you know, priorities that they have, and take some incremental steps there.
So, you know, I 100% agree with everything you said, and I'm curious to kind of stay on this line. You know, I'm in economic development. We've seen a lot of success in North Carolina as a whole, and one of the trends we're seeing is these projects are more capital intensive, right? They require more water, they require more electricity, but they're fantastic paying jobs. They're great companies in terms of environmental stewards, but regardless, there seems to be an increase in demand from an industry perspective. I'm curious, you know, how is that shaping kind of current policy, and how are companies grappling with this idea of there's growth, they want to be intentional, but there are some big demands there, and I'm also curious, you know, I think economic development is historically and currently is a bipartisan issue. So I'm curious how could, you know, this industry, you know, leverage those talking points into what they're doing as well.
Yeah, well, I would say, again, speaking of the value creation, and it can't only be jobs and numbers, but it needs to be, as we're thinking about resiliency and long term, talking to communities about how you're going to help them solve some of these growth challenges into the future. And that might be on infrastructure that you see, like roads and sidewalks. It could be on infrastructure that you don't necessarily see like broadband, internet, stormwater, and electricity. in my space, I work a lot in electricity and energy space. And we know that that's one of the #1 things that community leaders and residents are asking about. What impact is this going to have on the grid? Is there going to be enough energy? And that's not just for data centers. That can be for big office buildings or, or manufacturing plants. And so early engagement with the community is key. Showing that you want to help solve these challenges and be a good neighbor is key. I think and again, that's another part of sustainability, not just in the climate sense, but being a sustainable business and neighbor by showing that you're investing in the infrastructure to make it long-term successful. And I think, yeah, early engagement and it is super important.
Awesome. Thank you, Trevor. Loud and clear, heard that. I think that's one of the conversations we're having is with communities as they're grappling demands, potentially electrical and water, early engagement, communications with community to help them understand there's enough water, but here's kind of our resources, right, and how they lay out. I do want to remind folks that if you have questions, pop them in the Q&A, and we'll read those. We'll go through them as we receive them. Shifting gears a little bit, this is for both Michelle and Trevor. I'm curious if you could give a piece of advice to organizations just beginning to formalize their climate strategy. So just at the beginning of their journey, what would it be? Michelle, let's have it broad for you. And then Trevor, I would kind of switch that a little bit, and let's give context in the times. How does that change today, maybe to the broader one? Michelle?
Sure. So obviously, I'm coming from a communications perspective, right? But you need to understand what your pillars are, what the actual programmatic business things you're going to do, like saying that is established, right? So the first thing before you can talk about anything, you have to have a thing to talk about. So, what are the programs? What are the impacts that you're looking to make? What are the material areas you're going to engage in to sort of define those for your company? And then again, I say ground them in the why you're doing it so that it's self-reinforcing. And then as you are figuring out your strategies, figure out who you're going to talk to about these things. So understanding your audience, because then you want to tailor those messages, right? To help you achieve those goals that you set out in the business goals, you want to know who you're talking to. And because you can't have a conversation today without saying this, you have to remember that AI is actually an audience for your materials as well. Not only a tool to help you make them, but it's something that corporate communicators need to consider that this is an audience ingesting your information. That's a whole nother topic, but I think it's important to say. And then again, stick to those material topics. Know why you're doing what you're talking about, why you're talking about it, who you're talking to, and then get to it.
It's funny, Michelle, you mentioned AI being community. One of the things that we work with site selectors, and those are the consultants that help companies through their process. And they say, if you want to understand kind of what we're looking, you could easily just type in, what is the perception of the Raleigh-Durham market for XYZ industry, right? And it spits out an opinion on that, right? So I think that definitely resonates. Trevor, so same question, but also maybe wrapping a little bit nuance on the political realm we're in today. What is that piece of advice you'd give them?
Sure. So if you're just starting out with a climate action plan right now, good luck. So no, just kidding, kind of, but because it's a tough time, right? I mean, so just last week, in the midst of New York Climate Week was also the UN General Assembly. We saw President Trump give a speech that specifically said that climate was the biggest hoax, put on the world, and that it's ruining nations. So that was a lot. And then, so that's the rhetorical rhetoric climate that we're dealing with, but that's important to understand. So I think thinking about that, as Michelle said, focus on materiality and the why. And largely, I would say at this time, it's probably most important to be internal facing, to think about your own stakeholders, your employees, your investors, your customers, your leadership. What do they need to hear, understand? What are their priorities in sustainability and climate action? Focus there, build that strategy, and talk to them about it. There's not a lot of people right now besides that need to hear about this, because you might be setting yourself up with a target on your back if you're too loud about it right now. And that can be frustrating. I know, especially among folks who are passionate about climate action, and understand that the importance of making progress. Hearing advice saying that you don't need to be the loudest on these topics at this moment, it can be very frustrating. And I hear that. But I will say, what's most effective? Actual real tangible actions that an organization is making to improve their sustainability and their climate, or someone who is getting hauled in front of Congress to be grilled by members of Congress about why they're doing these ridiculous ESG actions, and then makes them too scared to have an actual ESG or climate strategy going forward. I would say the former. So quiet progress is better than speaking loudly and getting yourself in trouble. And political cycles shift and they change. This is a moment, and climate action requires a long-term commitment. And so it's interesting how we've talked about 2030 goals and 2050 goals. 2030 is 4 years and 3 months away. So, that does not feel very long term. So in that way, like, we've got to get going, right? We got to make some progress. But also the midterms are a year away. The next political cycle is just a few years after that. And people's priorities will change. If you look at polling from just a couple of years ago, at the beginning of the Biden administration, support for clean energy climate action was pretty high for Republicans comparatively where it's been. It's dipped lower now, and I think we see that in the national discourse. But I think also interesting, at the beginning of the first Republican debate for the 2020 cycle, there was a question from one of the first questions was about climate from a young conservative climate group. And one of the first times that coming from a Republican audience that was asked. And even more interestingly, the after party for the first Republican presidential debate was hosted by a Republican conservative climate action group. You would never have seen that in previous years, and it'd be very difficult probably to see that right now at the specific moment in time. But I just share all that to show that interest in these things, for good or bad, change and grow over time. So let's change with it. Let's adapt. But as we talked about, for the title here, stay the course, and have effective strategies and just adapt the way that we talk about them, because political cycles will shift.
Yep. Well, thank you, Trevor and Michelle. I do, before we hop over to kind of Q&A, I'd love to just give, a brief, any closing remarks from either of you that you want to leave us with.
I just want to echo something that Trevor said, because I totally agree. We have clients across the spectrum, again, Fortune 100 companies, private companies, and we see that they are grappling with what to do. And the companies that have truly business aligned the efforts that they are working on, so they are not responding to the political whims of the day. We see them kind of holding steady. They may not be shouting it from the rooftops, but the work continues, which is so important. And I think that is kind of the core, right? If you are doing this from a true place where it is aligned to what your business does and the value that you're adding to the community and to the world and to your business, right? To value creation in your business. This is not something that you're going to change because someone new has has said something one way or the other. And I think in a way, business operates on a much longer cycle than the political cycles. And so you have to take, and it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, it's hard, but to take a longer view, right? And you don't want to swing wildly in any direction because that's what it means to be grounded in something that is truly business aligned. So I agree with everything Trevor said, and I just wanted to echo it.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Trevor, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think I would say one, maybe for larger community of folks who are interested and care about this. I think we can get in our silos and we can talk to ourselves. But if we really want to make progress, we need to bring some more converts along. And so, all the things that Michelle's talked about communicating authentically, sticking to materiality, those are all things that can help us share the value and bring in, some more converts here. And also letting audiences be where they are for a bit. I know we're eager for progress and like, let's push folks along.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can feel weird to like congratulate someone for doing the bare minimum, but especially in politics, you need to do that.
Yeah.
Politicians want a little pat on the back for saying that climate change is important and we need to address it. Like, congrats for saying that. That's, not a big lift, but, good. We need, give them some credit. And same thing for businesses when they're making progress. If it's authentic and if it's warranted, give them some space. And so then I think that understanding also that in this challenging time, that focusing on the core things that really matter to really make a difference, and oftentimes that's going to be inward focusing and not external, is really going to make progress. We see sometimes that the tallest daisy gets cut, so being careful to in how we communicate and where we're communicating, where we're showing up, all of that is not bad. That's just being smart, and we can still be authentic. So I would say don't be afraid of that. And if you need some advice, ask someone like Trevor or Michelle. We're happy to help. But not being afraid to kind of to make some of those pivots, and understand that's you can still make progress and it's still being authentic, if you're just being smart about how we talk about this.
Awesome. So we actually have a couple questions. The first question, Trevor, we got was, you mentioned quiet progress. Can you kind of share some examples of what quiet progress might look like, and how do they communicate it? Is this in reporting or is this some other avenue? And then follow up to that with Michelle is what are you seeing in your corporate clients and how are they now thinking about communicating on ESG and sustainability? So Trevor first and then Michelle.
Sure, and I'll when it comes to reporting, I'll let Michelle opine on that as an expert there on some of those things. But I think again, quiet progress is I think the most authentic, and that's coming from a communicator. Like I want everybody to get credit for the good things they do. That's my job, is to help people get credit for it. But also, when you're actually making progress on your goals and your sustainability plans, that's truly the work that matters. So if reducing energy use, if we're making our products or our processes more efficient, and communicating those to our leadership, communicating that to our employees and our stakeholders, that's important. And there's various ways that we can do that. As I mentioned, working with the semiconductor company, products that they make are more efficient, they use less energy. That's good progress, incremental progress. Some large utilities that I've worked with before, if they're are bringing in more renewables onto the grid, or if they are improving the efficiency even of their gas turbines to be more efficient. That's good, quiet progress that they should make. Not everything needs a press release, and not everything needs a statement. And so, and by focusing on that will help you be more authentic when you do talk about it.
I'll give the like corporate reporting answer to this, which I think is quite in line with what you just said. So we have seen over the last 2 years or so, things going in a couple of directions, and definitely it is they're still doing the work, and they're reporting it, but they're not promoting it, right? There's a difference between just putting that thing out there and telling the whole world that it's the best thing you've ever done. So there's definitely that. And we've also been seeing a move towards decreasing what is called reporting and looking at it much more as a broad spectrum of strategic communications, because the reporting has a spotlight on it in a way that is sometimes scary. Call us Daisy and all. And so the thing that is the report might be shrinking, but they may be doing more of a suite of other items, topic briefs, audience specific communication, web focused communications that are getting that information out there to those really interested and invested stakeholders and audiences. But again, we're not talking about TV ads and even big social media campaigns. It's definitely much more of a for lack of a better word, like workmanlike way of communicating, right? You're getting the information out there that needs to be done. And as you said, right, some of the most important audiences are the employees, because they want to be proud of where they work and they want to see that authentic storytelling and commitment from the company they work for. So they're trying to meet a lot of really competing demands. It is a very challenging time. But I think that in the reporting world, what we're actually seeing is a little, in the US anyway, a little stepping back from capital R reporting and a little stepping into communications, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and I think a practical example of that I've seen recently, a large utility client that we work with, publishing their annual sustainability report, but we really encourage them to rethink what that means. Capital R reporting, what's the point? Why do we need to do this? We need to do it because there's a lot of cool stuff that they're doing. Like, so we want to talk about it. But a 70-page report, like, who's going to read that? Like,
no one,
right? AI maybe. So it was about shortening it, but also telling the story. And then also, I think, again, a very practical suggestion was looking at the user experience from your phone. So if it's a PDF they have to open on your desktop, you already limited your audience of who's ever going to open that up. So putting it into a format that could be easily scrolled through on a mobile device is just, such, I don't want to say easy because it does take a little bit of work, but a practical way to expand the usability of that information. And so, things like that, telling the story without calling it a gigantic report, it just, are practical things you can do.
Awesome. All right, so I have a question, Trevor. I think this is for you. I'm going to word it a little bit different. So as we think about federal policy shifting away from renewable towards maybe some legacy fossil industries, and then even using terms like clean coal, what is your perspective on that from like an energy policy perspective? Is this kind of a long-term goal, or is this, what are your just general thoughts on that from an energy policy perspective?
So I think it is interesting because even within traditional fossil fuel industry, there's a little bit of confusion sometimes with the administration's policy priorities, because lowering the price of oil is only so helpful to industry, right? So drilling to lower the price is challenging. We've, American industry has done big strides in reducing the cost of shale gas to make it more affordable at different prices, but even that has a floor at some point. So there's a not full alignment with industry all the time on administration policies there, and also on coal. I think what's very interesting that for all of the work the Obama administration did to regulate and push to clean up coal, retire coal, it was the market that did it. Essentially, that natural gas and renewables got cheaper, and so coal was just too expensive, and it was not worth the headache to keep reinvesting in that. And so the market can be a great friend to clean energy, when we can compete on reliability and price. And so I think there's just some disconnect sometimes with some of the policies like to push coal, because market wise it just doesn't really make sense. But if we are concerned about reliability, you can maybe stretch into finding a role for coal for base load. But even that, there's some other options when we're looking at advancements in nuclear and even in natural gas that would be smarter, less polluting alternatives. And so what I think is important is that industry needs to be appropriately vocal about energy choices. The energy industry themselves, who are experts, but also energy users, which is everybody, can talk about the business reasons why they want more options and not less options when it comes to energy. And this is very true about the IRA tax credits. We were advising clients years ago that it was going to be up to business to save IRA tax credits. Republicans weren't going to do it on their own. Democrats weren't going to have the power to do it on their own. Business needed to step in and say, we like these are good, these are making a difference. And it was going to be business who needed to save those credits. Business caught on too late. Is this mad rush in February, March to go in when businesses is going in to say, hey, IRA tax credits are great. Well, it's too late. We should have been singing that for years before that. So when it comes again to energy policy, I think trying to be pragmatic and smart and how we talk about it, that there's value in having more options rather than less will help shape policy more than talking about sustainability or climate with this administration.
So fantastic answer. You really talked about something, and I'm at a chamber of commerce, so we're bipartisan. We kind of echo the sentiment of the region and our business partners, right? So obviously sustainability is one that is continued piece of it. And I think one of the things that I just heard is industry does have a critical role in these conversations, and it's something that we harp on as your voices can sometimes go further than our voices, right? So I'm curious, Trevor, what is some guidance, like what are good ways for a company to engage on a specific policy? Is it just internal? Is it through Chamber of Commerce? Or like what are some practices on that?
A couple things. I think one, we've talked about that there's a challenge here in speaking up, that you don't want to put a target on your back by speaking up. That's a real challenge. It is. But going back to Michelle's expertise, which says focus on materiality, what's important, making that clear business case can help insulate you to give you some ground to stand on about why you care about some of these policies, because it's a real business impact to what you want to accomplish, and so it's justified to have a stance on it. And having that data, that information in your pocket to be able to back it up is important. Industry associations play a very important role right now. They can often speak loudly, maybe say some of the more controversial pieces or the sharper positions that can kind of insulate individual companies. So I'd say engage with your industry associations, engage with your chambers of commerce, because they can act as that way too. But then also businesses are community members and constituents, and so that is a powerful voice. So speaking first with your local policymakers directly, and then working up into your federal representatives and into the administration, bringing that authentic constituent voice and the reason why you're advocating can help make your case and insulate you from maybe any blowback that you might face. But it's a hard time to speak up, but understanding the audience, what they care about, focusing materiality can help you make a solid case and reduce some of your risk.
Thank you, Trevor. Thanks for the plug too. Agree with you. Engage with your Chamber of Commerce if you have a concern. I think we have time for one more question. If anyone has a question, feel free to type it in the chat. If not, I think we have a poll that we would love folks to give. Heather, I saw Heather hop on. Heather, do you want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you so much. That was such an informative, inspiring presentation, just to get to hear you all with your experience talk about making progress, not perfection, and just that quiet action and keeping that going, and political landscape will change. So I just thank you all who came to hear the call. I'll share that at the summit on Friday, there are 5 stories throughout the day of corporate progress, not perfection. And one of these is a really intriguing story of collaboration and innovation for the life cycle of EV batteries. So I think, there's just so much to be inspired by and to get ideas from. So I hope that you can join us at this summit. The link for that is in the chat. And I just want to invite you to take advantage of all of the week has to offer. There are 10 climate action workshops throughout the week. There's a climate showcase a career showcase this afternoon, and I'm afraid if you have not registered for that, or you're young student in your household, there are 2 spots left, so hop in there and grab those, because that's going to be a really neat session. And then there's consulting sessions offered on the website, so I'd invite you to check those out. But the next workshop is today at noon, and that's for you as an individual: help, comfort, and affordability. And these are the latest tools for energy efficiency for your home, whether you own or you rent. So this is for everyone. And then finally, if you are feeling worn out by your climate concern, there's a session this afternoon on personal and professional resiliency. And that's a really a kind of action-oriented, take this tool home to help with you. So all of that is coming up today. And then, as I said, the finale of NC Climate Week is the summit in Greensboro, and we welcome you to come to that. And then finally, I'll just ask, as Albert alluded to, that you take a couple of more minutes to take a survey that is on the screen now, and just lead yourself through it. 5 questions. It won't take long, but it'll make a tremendous difference for us as we're planning the rest of this week and next year. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you, Trevor, Albert, and Michelle, for your insights. See you at the next session.
Thank you.